Tom Harwood. Tom, you've just been in a number 10 briefing. Breaking news for us?
Yes, a bit of a clarification really today in terms of a story that has been brewing this morning, leading a number of bulletins across the United Kingdom. The idea that the Sizewell C, this new nuclear power plant in Suffolk, that the government may well be pulling out its investment. Well, it took them a while, but the government has now firmly slapped down those reports, saying that it's just as committed to Sizewell C as it was before. Now, this is significant because across the course of this morning, we've seen people, for example, the new leader of the Green Party cheering the reports that perhaps the government has backed out of this investment. We've seen a number of people campaigning for presumably less power generation in this country, not sure why they'd campaign for that, but they seem to, saying that it was a good thing that the government appeared to be pulling out of this. Well, some clear clarification now from the government that they are not pulling out of it, that the £700 million of investment into Sizewell C stands, and that negotiations in terms of getting the full funding for that, negotiations are going on with the company EDF in terms of getting this all set up. They are still going on and progressing. Now, it's unclear why the government took so long to clarify this point and let speculation run as wild as it did, but it seems there was over-interpretation of a line that was said from the government last night, that all capital investment is under review. People took that to mean perhaps more than they should have done.
Tom, if the government's even remotely serious about its pledge to get suppliers to be self-sufficient in energy, they simply have to press ahead with nuclear power stations like this one.
Certainly, and it's funny to remember back to what people were saying 10 or 12 years ago on this very subject. The complaint about nuclear power stations has always been, well, they take about a decade to build, so what's the point? Well, if we hadn't listened to that sort of doomerism a decade ago, we'd have a lot more domestic energy capacity in this country today. It's a lesson that the French learnt in the 1970s in the wake of the oil crisis. They decided to go big for nuclear. Now the French have 70% of their electricity coming from clean nuclear power stations, and guess what? They have lower energy bills than we do in the UK. It seems like a very obvious thing to go for, and interestingly, it's something that Boris Johnson tried to make a part of his legacy. I wonder how much of this is actually people looking at picking apart the legacy of Boris Johnson, because you'll remember in the final speech he made from the dispatch box of the House of Commons as Prime Minister, he said that you should not always listen to Treasury brain when it comes to investment and infrastructure, that we should go big and go for nuclear and make those investments and build those things that will serve us forward for the decades to come. Well, it sounds like the government is back on that track now, at least when it comes to nuclear investment, although it must be said other elements of the capital investment portfolio may well be being pared back. We got less equivocal answers from the Prime Minister's spokesman today when it came to Northern Powerhouse Rail. You'll remember that Liz Truss, when she was campaigning to become Prime Minister, promised a new railway station in Bradford, promised to build Northern Powerhouse Rail, as it is called, in full. Well, now this government only committing to what was called the Integrated Rail Review, the plan before Liz Truss, paring back on some of that rail investment.